Imagine a night of partying in an LGBT nightclub turning into a real nightmare. This is the story of The Fear Club, where supernatural forces invade the night, bringing terror and death. Are you ready for this scary story? Press play and join us. James, an outgoing and lively young man, was excited for the grand opening of the new LGBT club in town. The Rainbow Club promised to be a safe and vibrant space for the community, where everyone could celebrate their identity without fear of judgment. James, known for his contagious energy and cheerful spirit, invited his friends for the big opening night. Little did they know that this night of celebration would become an unforgettable nightmare. The club was packed. Colorful lights flashed to the rhythm of the music, creating an atmosphere of pure joy. James and his friends danced and laughed, enjoying the feeling of freedom. The environment was welcoming, with thematic decorations celebrating LGBT pride. Everything seemed perfect, but something sinister was lurking, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. As the night progressed, James noticed something strange. The lights began to flicker irregularly, and the temperature in the club dropped drastically. The laughter and conversations were replaced by an unsettling silence, and a sense of discomfort took over the place. The patrons started looking around, trying to understand what was happening. James approached the bar to get a drink when he saw something that made his blood run cold. In the mirror behind the bar, he saw a reflection that shouldn't be there. A dark figure with empty eyes and a macabre smile was watching him. When he turned to look directly, there was no one there. The mirror, however, continued to show that terrifying presence. The music stopped abruptly, and the lights went out completely. The club was plunged into total darkness, and panic set in. Screams echoed off the walls as people tried to find the exit. James and his friends gathered, trying to stay calm and find a way out of that cursed place. However, the emergency doors were locked and the windows wouldn't open. It was as if the club had turned into a prison. James felt a cold presence beside him and, when he looked, saw the same dark figure he had seen in the mirror. It was closer, with its eyes fixed on him. Fear gripped his body and he began to run, pulling his friends with him. The supernatural forces began to manifest more aggressively. Objects flew through the air, and shadows moved quickly among the patrons, attacking them. James saw one of his friends being pulled to the ground by invisible hands, screaming for help. He tried to help her, but was pushed by an invisible force that threw him against the wall. Every corner of the club seemed to be taken over by these malevolent entities. The atmosphere was filled with fear and despair. James realized that they needed to find the source of this curse to have any chance of escaping. He remembered a local legend about the land where the club was built, a story of tragedy and revenge that could explain what was happening. James vaguely recalled a story his grandmother used to tell about that land. In the early 20th century, there was a house there, inhabited by a family that practiced occult rituals. It was said that they invoked evil spirits that drove them to madness and death. The house was demolished, but the spirits remained, haunting any construction erected on the site. Determined to find a solution, James led his friends to the club's basement, believing that there they might find the key to breaking the curse. The basement was dark and damp, with a smell of mold and decay. In the center, they found an ancient altar, covered in strange symbols and melted candles. It was clear that something terrible had been invoked there. James knew they needed to perform a liberation ritual to calm the spirits. Using fragments of memory and help from his friends, they began to recreate a banishment ritual. They lit candles, drew protective symbols on the floor, and recited ancient words of purification. As they performed the ritual, the entities became more violent, trying to interrupt them. Shadows danced around, whispering threats and promises of death. James and his friends continued, united by the hope of surviving. The candles flickered, and an intense light began to emanate from the altar, enveloping the basement in a bright aura. At the climax of the ritual, the entities launched their fiercest attack. James felt a sharp pain in his chest, as if something was trying to rip out his soul. His friends screamed in pain and fear, but no one gave up. With a final phrase, the ritual was completed, and an explosion of white light filled the basement. When the light disappeared, the entities were gone too. Silence returned to the club, now devastated by the supernatural battle. James and his friends were exhausted, but alive. They climbed the stairs with difficulty, finding the hall empty and silent. The curse seemed to have been broken, but the club was destroyed. James and his friends left the club, but the horror of that night would follow them forever. They decided never to return to that cursed place, but they knew the spirits might just be asleep, waiting for another chance for revenge. Days later, James began to notice strange signs in his house. Objects moved on their own, and he heard whispers in the silence of the night. The terror seemed to follow him, even outside the club. He understood that the battle was far from over. The curse was now linked to him, and the fight against the supernatural forces continued. James tried to resume his life, but every shadow, every sound in the dark, brought back the fear of that night. He knew the entities were still there, waiting for the right moment to strike again. The battle against evil was just beginning, and James was determined to find a way to end the curse once and for all. Do you want part 2 of this story? Leave it in the comments. If you have a horror story and want to see it published on our channel, send us your story.